I'm Jim Csek with Kelowna Now. With me,
Renee Merrifield.
and here we are with Beyond the Ballot again. This is like, there is so much going on, so much going on. We're going to start in BC, of course. We'll start in BC and April 1, the end of the carbon tax. Eby doesn't look happy about it, though.
No, he can't be happy. I mean, the budget is absolutely going to be blown to smithereens. We basically have his promise of following the feds in removing carbon tax will leave a $2 billion hole in that budget that is already $11 billion short. So we've got a $13 billion budget. They're heading back into the Legislative Assembly this week to start the debate on estimates, and that is going to be a horrible time. Peter Millibar, MLA for Kamloops, is an absolutely brilliant finance mind. And he's going to have his way with Brenda Bailey over, a lot of the inconsistencies and a lot of these revenue deficits that we find ourselves in, and basically attack it from an economic perspective. So very scary times for BC, very scary times for the next 3 years. I saw a presentation by the BC Business Council chief economist David Williamson this last week, and the charts are not good. It basically has us leading 3 years of solid deficits that are going to be in the 13 to 14 billions in every single year.
Yeah, and so you got two choices: raise revenues, which is really tough when capital's fleeing the province, and then two, raise taxes. And they've raised taxes. Like, how many taxes have they added since the NDP have come into power? Like, I can't even remember. There's a lot, though, right?
33 either increase your new taxes. We definitely cannot be taxed more. That's inflating the cost of living, and British Columbians have already been wincing underneath the pressure of what that looks like. So we really have to do a better job of raising revenues, and this government's not good at that. They don't know how to actually incent business. They don't know how to get businesses started. They put their $500 million in BC fund together. And so far it's gone to a lot of foundations that have yet to deploy those monies. So we don't even with 500 million deployed that are supposed to be, stimulating our tech and our biotech industries, we can't seem to get it out the door, and it's not making any noticeable difference in our economy.
Yeah, so the United States is a big attractant right now because they're saying they're going to reduce regulation, plus they're going to lower taxes. So a lot of capital going that way. So obviously, we need to figure out a way to make it attractive here. And I'm not sure I've heard any ideas that make it sound like, oh, this is the better place to invest in British Columbia.
Simply because it's not. In order for a business to do that, they need to signal that they're open for business. They need to signal that by changing regulation and changing legislation. And so far, all of the NDP has done over the course of this last 8 years has been make it more difficult for businesses, more costly for businesses, and businesses are fleeing. Investment dollars are fleeing. So far, I don't see any hope on the horizon, and nothing in this budget would change my mind in terms of a stimulation of our economy in any way, shape, or form. In fact, Eby's claim that he's going to fast track these mining projects, they're all projects that have been caught, some for 6 and 7 years in the NDP muck and mire of environmental assessments. Again, I just don't see them coming through this without really sacrificing BC's economy and without seeing us head into a recession.
Yeah, and I just don't know how they're going to plug that hole. Are we going to see just additional gas taxes? Because there's other gas taxes that are put on as well. There's a provincial sales tax and stuff like that. I mean, are they just going to increase those to kind of like offset this loss from the carbon tax?
No, they're saying that they're going to increase the industry's carbon tax, but they were supposed to come in with their carbon pricing for large industry and look at an emissions cap on them, and so that would almost be working juxtaposition with a carbon tax.
Yeah.
And the industrial carbon tax is only 199 million of that budget. So it's really a drop in the bucket when you're looking at $2 billion that will be sacrificed in terms of the carbon tax that's collected right now. But what I want to kind of point out is that, number one, British Columbians were being taxed the highest of any of the provinces. And number two, we got the least back. of any of the provinces. And that was proven, through the estimates process over the course of the last 2 years. And that was part of the documentation that was shown by some of the budget process. That's not a good thing for British Columbians. And the fact that this government has leaned heavily and relied heavily on that carbon tax, I think, is another indication that this government doesn't know how to actually stimulate the economy and is continuing to put more cost onto business and will cause, industrial dollars to flee even further.
Yeah, and then the other thing that the province is kind of famous for is this safe drug supply, which is, to the ire of some of the other provinces where some of this safe supply has ended up in the wrong hands and is actually being illegally trafficked into provinces like Alberta. And Eleanor Sturco, again, continuing to demand a public inquiry and asking for Bonnie Henry's job.
Yeah, and she should. Eleanor Sturco has been on this story for the last 3 years. Even as decriminalization came in, Eleanor was the one MLA that was sounding the alarm bell, that was on all of the exposés, that was, getting whistleblowers to come forward and protecting their identities. And what we see now is everything she predicted has been proven to be true. There is not one expose that she has done over the course of the last 3 years that has not. And, even when the decriminalization was walked back and when we've seen the safe supply walked back, I texted her and I said that, be proud. This is the work that we do as MLAs that's really worthwhile. And, so I'm super proud of her for continuing on this front. And we know it to be true. We anecdotally, as citizens, can walk our streets and understand that, yes, there are more people using drugs. There are more people overdosing. Our first responders have been sounding the alarm bell saying we can't continue at this pace. And we see that whether it's our firefighters, whether it's our ambulance drivers, in certain days, all they're doing is just going from naloxone kit to naloxone kit to naloxone kit. So we know that this is happening. We've heard about it happening. And finally, we have documented evidence written not by one university, but by 3 universities to say, yes, MLA Sturco is absolutely correct. There is more going on than what meets the eye, and this has not resulted in any meaningful positive change, and in fact has resulted in a very, very significant detrimental change to British Columbians' lives, and that's in the form of 30% increase overdoses.
Yeah, I was just going to say that report, that study came out there, and it shows that, and that story is on KelownaNow.com if anybody wants to go and read that it's actually increased the amount of overdoses and access to the hospital. I mean, more hospitalizations and all that. So,
and let's remember, this is a failed experiment by the NDP and by the federal Liberal government. The federal Liberal government, and this was something that the BC United, when I was part of the caucus, were exposing, was that Health Canada was actually issuing licenses for cocaine and heroin, for safe supply, as it were, cocaine and heroin. So, Bonnie Henry's, basic charge towards legalization of all illicit drugs is real. And that's something that she has said on record, that she wants to see all drugs legalized. And what we know now is that legalized drugs and safe supply leads to increases of overdose and ultimately increases of deaths.
Yeah, and the other problem with that is that some of those drugs ended up in the illegal drug trade and into the other provinces as well. And nicely packaged, though.
They're being traded, right? And they're being relaced with things like fentanyl, and then they're being sold back to people as safe supply. It's absolutely abhorrent. It was Danielle Smith and her government under Marshall Smith and as the chief of staff that started signaling and sounding the alarm bell that safe supply was arriving to them. I remember that Mike Ellis at the time, who is the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions, he actually came and did a presentation to both caucuses, both the NDP and to the opposition caucus, and showed us what their RCMP, and he is a former RCMP member, had chapter and verse about what they were finding on their streets, and it was our safe supply. It was part of the expose that Eleanor Sturco was doing on how much of it was being seized or apprehended by the RCMP. And we have to remember that that amount is a drop in the bucket compared to what was actually out there on the illicit drug circles, and a drop in the bucket compared to what was actually being supplied. And that safe supply was coming from Fair Pharma, and we know that former public health officers were part of that, as well as our current part of the shareholder structure of that, and profiting from the safe supply that was being doled out by government. So this is not a conspiracy theory. This is all well proven and part of mainstream media. So definitely do some homework and take a look at it. It's absolutely been detrimental to our economy, or sorry, not our economy, our society. And we see it on our streets. The trauma is literally laying on our streets.
Well, let's turn our attention to the big election that's happening here. A lot of people saying it's such an important election for 2025 to determine what we do, with the Trump tariffs still hanging on our neck. The Bloc came out, though, and said, Blanchette came out and said that the Liberals are a bigger threat to Canada than Trump.
And I believe they are correct. And the reason being, we don't need to focus on Trump. Trump is going to be either empowered or inoculated come 18 months from now. He's got those midterms, which are, coming up, and that will either leave him dead in the water, or if the Americans really love it, they'll give him maybe another 2 years, but then it'll really go away. What we need to focus on is where Canada needs to go. What we need to focus on is where are we at a GDP per capita. We are the dead last in the G7. We are dead last in the G20, and we are predicted by the OECD to be dead last, not just for these last 10 years, but for the next 20 and 30 years, because we do not have an economy that is firing on all cylinders. So far, I've heard nothing from Carney that would lead me to believe that he is anything other than what his book says, which is, if you haven't read it already, please read a synopsis, get ChatGPT or any AI to give you a synopsis of what his book is about. And his book is very clear. He wants to raise carbon tax to over $300 a ton, and he wants to green the economy and force all of the dollars from our financial institutions into green spending. The financial institutions have already weighed in. They've already said that it does not work. And they have all systematically walked away from the committee, the global committee that was struck by Carney. So we need to follow suit. Net Zero Alliance and the GFANs. We need to follow suit. Canadians should not be signing up for this. And I know that a lot of people accuse you and I, Jim, of being just conservative, right wing, lover,
flag wavers, or whatever you want to call us. Yeah.
Sorry. But honestly, I was of the era of the Chrétien and Paul Martin eras, where they were firing on all cylinders. They were getting our economy back from the Canadian peso days. I don't know if anyone remembers those in the 90s, when our dollar was so low that we couldn't even see straight, and basically we were falling into oblivion. Chrétien really pulled us out of those times, and I would, if it was him running under these times, I would have a different story to tell. But right now, the only one that has been true to the message from the get-go is Pierre Poilievre, and I think we need to follow suit. I do not understand the polls. I don't understand the polls based on what's happening with the rallies. Carney can barely get a rally of 250 people scrapped together, and Pierre is drawing crowds of 4,000. Doesn't make sense to me as to how the polls can be reflecting what they are. But I think that if anything, the Liberals have peaked too early. And I think that right now, as soon as we get into debates and as soon as we keep on the campaign trail, I mean, Carney cannot have a day without a significant gaffe, calling Polytechnic University Concordia, referencing his female candidate by the wrong name, being asked about why he doesn't have more females on his cabinet, and referencing a man. I don't know what other gaffes you need to have from Carney, but I mean, he so far from a political perspective and a campaign trail, he's just been abysmal.
I mean, Jean Chrétien, you and I have talked about this before. He's been my political hero. We had him here at Level Up. We had both him and Harper here, and I got
Yeah.
to introduce Jean Chrétien. That proves that he was my political hero. And I thought I was like dyed in the true liberal as well. But like what these liberals are is not what Canada needs. We definitely have a problem. Our wealth is beneath our feet. And that Stephen Guilbeault was the one that was completely outraged when the Bloc said that. I mean, he's always outraged, it seems like. Him and Greta Thunberg, they always seem to be on some type of outrage. But, he's basically second in command. And if you go read Mark Carney's platform on his website, it talks about this mandating the banks back in. Like, because these banks have all left. All the U.S. big banks have left this net zero alliance. And I'd say all the Canadian banks have left.
All of them.
Japanese banks are leaving. And then so he's saying that he's going to mandate them back in. He's actually, his company and him is under investigation in antitrust in the United States for this climate alliance, which has forced companies to do things that they wouldn't have done, which has been to the detriment of American citizens. And I could say the same thing in Canada. If like you talked about our per capita GDP, the lowest in the G7, G20. And it's abysmal, and it's because of people like Stephen Guilbeault. It's the same team. That's what people have to recognize. It's a new leader in the same team, and he was actually part of the team. He's just stepping from the shadows to the forefront.
And not just the same team in terms of the ministers that he's got positioned around him, but the same team in terms of those, strategists that are behind him. The same team that, took us into these net zero green initiatives. And what's even more dangerous about Carney to me is that he profits off of these green initiatives. And you don't have to look farther than his own company and that he chairs and that he is a significant shareholder of. They have been huge profiteers from it. And the conflicts of interest, whether it is with the Chinese loan that they've received or whether it's with the Bermuda tax shelters that he's created for his investors. I mean, we're talking about some serious issues with how things have been handled. And I think if everyday Canadians understood that he's avoiding taxes and he's profiting from allegiances with China right after he's advising Canada. I mean, these are huge conflicts of interest that I think warrant more investigation. And so far, I mean, the media have kind of given him a free pass now, but he has not disclosed his business interests. And again, that's a significant blunder in my mind.
So this blind trust that he keeps referring to, I'm an accountant as well. It's this blind trust he keeps referring to. Like if you put in all your shares of Brookfield Asset Management, which you had a ton of options on. So if that's one of your main things that you put in there, and it just sits there, you know what that company does. You don't. It's a thinly veiled blind trust, if anything, right? Because it's not that you need to go and manage it every day. If you're setting policy and agenda that betters the outcomes for Brookfield Asset Management, best disclose that, because you shouldn't make any decisions that better Brookfield Asset Management position. Well, because what's Brookfield Asset Management doing? They're selling carbon credits. They're doing a ton of things, including a ton of real estate. Jagmeet Singh broke a story on it. It's on Holly Doan's Blacklocks there. We talked about it this morning. That they talked about their real estate and how they called it their sweet spot when they were squeezing renters in Toronto by billing them extra things because they couldn't increase the rents, but they charges extra utilities, extra services, and these things. And he said that you got to go read the story because it doesn't put Brookfield Asset Management in a very good light.
No, and Carney is involved in this. Furthermore, Carney took and moved Brookfield to the U.S. Took their head office down and then claimed that he didn't know about it, despite the fact that the decision actually has his signature on it, and he chaired the meeting where that decision was made.
It must
These
have
are
been
not. Carney is a smart man. He knew exactly when he was there. He knew exactly when he resigned. So the fact that he is still trying to tell Canadians that he didn't have anything to do with it, I think is incredibly misleading and borders on deceitful.
I've even heard some journalists defend it by saying, how are we ever going to get really good people like Mark Carney to do this if you're going to keep asking questions like that? It's just like, wow. Talk about running cover.
Being in the political spotlight, you got to be used to, you got to get really used to having your private life.
So he gets a pass, right? He gets a pass. Like you can make all the money you want as long as, just like, wow.
Yeah, it's scary to me. It's scary to me. And that's where we get politicians who have $100,000 salary every year that are leaving politics with $40 million accounts, because simply they're making decisions and they're influencing government to do things that they benefit from and profit from. The disclosure system is set up to allow Canadians to vote. And that's the only thing we can do. We don't have a system that actually, if you get in trouble with the ethics commissioner, there's no penalty for you, as we know, because Trudeau, he got hand slapped by the ethics commissioner 4 different times, but there's no bite to that. The bite is in the voter and the voting public. And right now, the polls have shown that the voting public isn't seeing that yet.
And if I got to ask questions, because only a select few media, the selected media, get to ask questions of Mark Carney, and why aren't they asking the question about the disclosure on the green slush fund? Why we prorogue government? One of the reasons. Why not just say, let's have those documents? Because Stephen Guilbeault is still there, and we're going to vote for him again. And his conduct's been called into question. So why not clear the air, and let us see the documents?
Absolutely. If there's nothing to see, then there's just nothing to hide. Right. Full disclosure should be coming, and yet they basically tied up government for the last 4 months of sitting, because the Liberals were unwilling to abide by the Speaker's demand that they show those documents.
And then Mark Carney, when asked again by a reporter, why won't you disclose? And he's basically condescendingly said to her, look, I've done more than I'm supposed to do. So you found a loophole. Why not just build trust with Canadians and just disclose? Do it.
More than I'm supposed to. What does that even mean?
Yeah, exactly.
What you're supposed to do is, once you're elected, you put everything into a blind trust in 120 days. I don't think that means anything. I don't think anything is in a blind trust. And I think that once he discloses it, it'll be in a blind trust 120 days after election. But I don't think it's there right now. I think he could absolutely be profiting from everything that's happening in Canada and everything that's happening between Canada and the United States.
Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Why not disclose, especially that green slush fund thing too? Just open the books, let everybody have a look at it. Because here we are going to vote for guys like Stephen Guilbeault and the likes of that, Chrystia Freeland and all of them, who basically said, Chrystia Freeland in her own words said, Canada spent the last 10 years virtue signaling and identity politics. Yes. She was part of that. She was in the co-pilot seat, right? And and she still wants your vote as well. And TV pundit now, though, Tom McClare, former NDP leader, says Canadians should not vote for the NDP.
No.
And he's saying vote for either the Liberals or the Conservatives, but, most of those NDP votes would go to the Liberals, I think.
Yeah, he was out defending Poilievre and that decision to not get the security briefing. Yeah. I mean, I don't understand how CSIS can give the information to the Globe and Mail, but can't give it to a politician without a...
He did do a good job. We did play that clip this morning as well. He did do a good job in saying, this is not a story. This is just a mugging. And yet it seems like there's a select few of the media that continue with the same attack line, right? And then Carney plays this attack line as well. And Carney just accused Poilievre of slander, and which is, you really can't slander a political opponent, right? So, because you just make up stuff all day long, right? So
exactly. So no, I don't think there's going to be a lot of weight on that. I do want to remind everyone that's watching and that sees this is that the media largely predicted that Kamala Harris would win. Up until the final days, and definitely gave her more airtime, definitely were harder on Trump. And in the end, Trump won. It was the betting sites that predicted that most accurately. And I think, Jim, you and I had several conversations about that. I'll draw our attention to the fact that the betting sites, when the writ dropped, were largely pro-liberal and showed that the Liberals are going to win. Those same betting sites are now neck and neck, and they're saying that it's a horse race between the two parties. This will go down as the implosion of the NDP. I hope that it's a it's not just a gone for today. I think I hope it's gone forever. I also think that, I hope that people understand that the NDP federally are also the NDP provincially. So, the NDP that we have sitting, in BC are the same party. It's just the political or the provincial aspect in BC. So I really hope that this implosion teaches Jagmeet a lesson, but also teaches the rest of the NDP, hitching your wagon to the one that's out to, to basically, see your implosion to its end. I don't think is wisdom.
Yeah, I'd like to again remind, and you and I have done this several times, remind Canadians that a lot of our wealth and is in Alberta and Saskatchewan and BC as well, but we just kind of suppressed ours. But the number one contributor to Canada's GDP is Alberta's oil and gas. Like number one, by far. It is not the largest because Ontario has a lot of diversification, but Alberta's oil and gas is the number one, and it's doing that while it's being like its throat is being stepped on at the same time, right? Imagine if it was unleashed, what it could do.
Oh, it would be remarkable. And right now, largely the federal Liberals have put Saskatchewan and Manitoba, especially their grain farmers or legume farmers, and potash, just literally left them out to dry. Scott Moe's been really trying to make a lot of noise and talk about the tariffs that have been put on them by China in retaliation for our EV tariff, but has gone on deaf ears. And in fact, the diminutive language and the dismissive posture of the federal Liberals has been really disheartening to those that are creating our wealth. And that would be Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. So I really hope that we see a shift or change. And I hope that, I hope that something gets done to really help those provinces out right now, because it's pretty dire.
I got to give credit to the Liberal strategists, though, like Katie Telford and them, because they sure know how to work it in driving like that fear, hate, and division, because that is the secret sauce of the Liberals for sure. And then today, I think, Chrystia Freeland threw some more Tesla into there, because they try to poke Trump and Elon Musk so that they can drive, so they react, so they can drive some more hate. I think today they were saying they're kicking Tesla out of this and freezing. She's the queen of the freeze, actually, freezing bank accounts, freezing this, freezing that. Now freezing Tesla rebates and stuff like that. So I think they do that intentionally to get a reaction so that they can show the Canadian people what they need to be scared of.
Yeah, and I'm really looking for hope. Like in the midst of this chaos, I'm looking for who is the voice of hope in all of this. And I was up one night late, and Jim, you and I talk about our wacky sleep schedules, but I was up late and looking through on X and came upon a video, and literally the video is just Pierre Poilievre door knocking. That is what the video is. It's 7 minutes long, so you don't have to watch all of it. Put it on double time if you want. But finally, a message of hope that was coming through to people as he was going to the doors with his candidate. And, for me, I have 5 kids that are, between the ages of 23 and 29. Right now, they need some hope. We've got one that is a condo owner, but other than that, and bought at just a really fortunate, opportune time when the market had slumped right at the beginning of COVID. But the others are looking at and facing a really bleak future where they don't even think that they're going to be able to own.
You got to go to my LinkedIn and read the post I put up there. I really slagged on my generation and said, because it's the generation that's supporting the Liberals right now, as opposed to the young people that are supporting the Conservatives. And I said, you got to give youth a chance here, because they've been disenfranchised, and that's not a good place for Canada to be. Rommel, can we play the clip from Danielle Smith that's in the Daily Document, if you could find that for the next couple seconds here? There's a message of hope. Danielle Smith, we need more politicians. And when Pierre speaks too, he's very impassioned and very good speaker. There's some really good speakers, and people talk about, communicating a message. And, got to give Justin Trudeau credit. He could actually speak, right? He could actually talk when he got all fired up. But, Mark Carney, I think he says 25 ums in like 2 or 3 sentences, right? He definitely stumbles around, because I think he's trying to think of a way around what he's supposed to say. It's not really coming from his heart. It's coming from, how do I kind of sidestep this and that?
Yeah, I mean, you're giving more credit to Trudeau than I would. I never found him a very eloquent speaker. In fact, I found his cadence and his breathiness a little bit off-putting. But other than that, I know that yeah, Polyev, it seems more authentic. It definitely seems to come from, from a true place. And those around Polyev that know him very well speak that, what you see is what you get. He is who he is on a daily basis. And you get the same person, whether you're behind closed doors or in front of a stage. So that definitely has, I've only met him a handful of times. And I'll tell you something remarkable. Yes, I was the MLA, but I was actually in Surrey at an event where he was attending, and as I was walking towards him with a few of my colleagues, so very noticeable in terms of we were all BC United at the time. But he said, "Hey, Renee," and addressed me and said, "How's Kelowna?" Like his memory, I said, I don't know if someone's in your ear right now telling you who I am, but honestly, to only have met me, one time previous to that as the MLA of Kelowna and to remember me, I found very remarkable considering the number of people he's met over the course of the.
And I remember that too, because I've interviewed him a couple times now. And also we had that event when he was running for leadership here. And one of the remarkable things I do remember there, because we had like 300 people, and his aides were saying, we got to go. He stayed for every handshake, and he didn't rush anybody through. People got a chance to talk. I just was, wow. And every time I met him, he called me by my name as I walked up, so he remembered who we were, or he has really good people, I guess. But I'm going to play this clip from Danielle Smith. This is a lady with passion.
Speaker, are they for real? Do they really think that Justin Trudeau was the one out there advocating on behalf of the energy industry in the United States? The guy who imposed the No More Pipelines bill, the tanker ban, an emissions cap on oil, an emissions cap on methane, net zero power regs, net zero vehicles, net zero building construction? Mr. Speaker, those are all policies advanced by the NDP. Right. It's the Liberal NDP coalition that is damaging this province, damaging our industry, and I'm the one standing up for it.
She's on fire.
Whew, that was passionate. And she is absolutely, unequivocally, 100% correct. And for us to think for 1 second that Carney is going to do anything other than what was started by Trudeau, I think we would be insanely naive. And I hope it's not $1,000 rebate check that Eby is going to give us a kind of tactic that we will actually fall for.
I just want to remind people again, on the climate thing. I'm not anti-climate or anything, and neither is Renee. What we're trying to say is
electric cars. Yeah. Both Jim and I have electric cars.
So we both drive electric cars. I have solar on my roof. But if you look at Norway, as an example, which has about a 94% adoption rate of electric cars, they have a sovereign wealth fund of $300,000 plus per person sitting there, all off the back of oil and gas, They've used their resources to better their nation and help their people. And that's what we could do here. We have so much wealth, and yet we were sitting at the bottom of per capita GDP, and people are you can ask anybody, we're almost all to a man or a woman worse off than we were 10 years ago.
And, the number that you just gave, right now, just after this year's budget, the NDP provincially are going to take us to having debt. So rather than $350,000 of a sovereign fund of wealth, we will have $39,000 per person that lives, breathes today in BC of debt, thanks to the NDP.
And everybody that screams that oil and gas is bad, maybe should stop taking the checks from Alberta, because they basically dole out money to the rest of the country. So you can't have your cake and eat it too. And it's really, like, it's selfish not to think of what Alberta does and what, because we're all Canada. But I mean, Alberta is making a sacrifice, but no different than us in the media, right? We seem to be getting choked off, Alberta getting choked off. And it's these people that can help our youth. It's the Saskatchewan, the Manitoba, and BC used to be in that place, right? BC used to be in that place. BC used to be Alberta and BC used to be kind of like 1 and 2 kind of thing.
We did. And we have seen over the course of the last 8 years our economy plummet. We were number one. We are now number 10. Seen our inflation rate outpace all of the rest of Canada's. Seen our cost of living as the highest in all of the provinces, and we have seen our gas prices the highest of all of Canada. Our housing prices the highest in North America, not even all of Canada, but in North America. And then we're scratching our heads wondering why. Look no further than the BC NDP government. They have put us absolutely in this position, but, and I say a big but, Trump is not our enemy right now. He's not our enemy provincially. He's not our enemy federally. We have put ourselves into an over-reliance on the US for trade and for our economy and for security. And that has positioned us so poorly in this moment that we don't have anything to fight Trump, with. And Jim, when you and I started this show, we talked a lot about how, we don't have any poker chips to play with. We're literally, have allowed our federal Liberal government and our provincial NDP to take our poker chips off the table. And thank goodness for Danielle Smith standing up for Alberta as she promised, and standing up against the very policies that have crippled us as a nation and crippled us as a province.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's been the problem for the past 10 years, because Chrystia Freeland said it out of her own mouth, they've wasted 10 years with virtue signaling and identity politics, is a media that is free and independent, that is not worried about losing their funding and their jobs because of the government. And Holly Doan said it from Black Lux, we were going to have a government or a media that is basically an arm of the government, and that's not healthy for a democracy. We need to have a free and independent media, then we'd be holding these people accountable. We wouldn't have got 10 years of this. We wouldn't have made it through 10 years.
100%. And anyone who is a boomer or someone that, remembers back when, yes, did media need to change? For sure. But we used to have investigative journalists who would expose all of these different aspects. And I can tell you that the reason that those three universities studied our overdoses was because of journalists like Adam Zivo, who stayed on the story and made sure that there were exposés that were on the decriminalization and on the safe supply. We need those journalists. We need, the investigative aspect of how journalism keeps and holds government to account. It's how our system is created. And yes, did we need to digitalize? Yes, we needed to, come into the new era of how people are getting their media. But the rules and laws that the federal government have implemented have sabotaged a person's ability to get news at the, in the way that they see fit, and has absolutely crippled our media outlets to make any sort of an income. And Jim, I'm very sorry that you guys are on the receiving end of that. And I dearly hope that we see change in that.
We watch Mark Carney say when he opens his speech, "I love the CBC," and then Pascal St-Onge on her way out the door says we're going to double the funding for the CBC, and then Mark Carney not allowing, not just one time, several times, not allowing certain journalists into the room to ask questions. Government should not be deciding who and who is not a journalist.
No, agreed.
Anyway, I think a great show again. Great show. Lots of good stuff to go on. And we got a whole month of back and forth, and we shall see how this works out. And it's a crucial election for many, many reasons. And Yeah,
and I just encourage everyone, thank you for watching today. We try and be as informative as we possibly can with as many facts that you guys can follow up on as possible. But really, you know what? I just encourage you, get involved. Start talking to your neighbors, figure out who you're going to vote for, but also just start watching. Watch what's going on. Watch some of the speeches, and feel that passion for who we are and who we could be and our future as a country.
And just think what we could do if we put Canada first.
For a change.
We do thank you for watching Kelowna Now.